And since we're in a digital format, we will now cruise into the first technical session. The first technical session is the post-COVID economic recovery and restoring growth momentum in BIMSTEC, which is so very important. We have an extremely very, very bright panel with us, very learned panel. Dr. Posh Raj Pandey, who is the chairman of Swati South Asia on Trade and Economics and Environment, Nepal, one of the partner institutes. He will chair the session. I believe Dr. Pandey is here. Dr. Pandey is here? Yes, I think he's here. The panel will constitute. Yes, Dr. Pandey. Good morning. Good morning. How are you? It's nice to see you after a very long time. The speakers will be Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia ji, who is the former ambassador of India to Myanmar. Namaskar, sir. Once again, very nice to see you again. We hope to hear great things from you. Good old friend and a very, very sound scholar from Thailand, Assistant Professor Surat Horaichaikul, Founding Director of India Studies Center, Chulalongkorn University, who has been with the BIMSTEC journey for very, very long. And so they are, we are good friends. Dr. Fahmida Khatun, Executive Director, Center for Policy Dialogue, Bangladesh. Madam, I hope you are around. Right. I hope she's... Can you hear us, madam? Dr. Fahmida Khatun, can you hear us, madam? We wait for her. Unfortunately, Dr. Sri Radha Datta, who was a senior fellow of Vivekananda International Foundation, has a family situation and could not come and could not join. She has informed at the last minute. We'll miss her. And this panel, the discussant for this particular panel will be Ms. Shravana Barua, who is the ICCI Doctorate Fellow of Center for International Politics and Organization and Disarmament at JNU New Delhi. Is Ms. Barua around? Can you hear us, madam?
Yes, I am. I can hear you clearly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I believe Dr. Khatun will join very shortly. So without much ado, I would like to hand over the deliberations for this particular panel to Dr. Posh Raj Pandey. Over to you, Dr. Pandey. And I would just kindly remind you that the session is from 12 to 1:30 p.m., sir.
Okay. Namaste, distinguished speakers and participants. At the outset, let me congratulate Professor Arindam Mukherjee and the Institute of Social and Cultural Studies for organizing the symposium when it seems the concept of regional cooperation in South Asia, at least at official level, is dormant. And I would also like to thank for providing this opportunity. As you know, the theme of this first technical session is post-COVID economic recovery, restoring growth momentum in BIMSTEC. Well, the COVID pandemic has not only triggered health crisis, but also disrupted our political, economic, and social system. However, every crisis has three phases: the emergency, regression, and finally a recovery. With vaccination as well as a move from widespread lockdown to more targeted intervention, BIMSTEC countries have entered into the phase of recovery. Our fiscal and monetary policies as well as social security program have supported our recovery. Now daily caseloads has come down. Economic activities have rebounded. Jobs are created. Exports of goods are recovering. Strong growth in remittance has been maintained. But the recovery is in fragile territory. I would say, it's in fragile territory. There is still a threat of mutation of the virus and also the onslaught of third wave of infection. Multilateral organizations such as the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, And Asian Development Bank has revised their growth rate downward compared to their previous projection. Among the BIMSTEC countries, growth projection for 2021 is negative for Bhutan and Myanmar, and less than 4% for other countries except India and Bangladesh. Where the growth for India is about 10%, and for Bangladesh it's about 5%. The COVID has also amplified economic and social inequalities. Years of progress have been halted or reversed. Millions of people were pushed back into extreme poverty, and now they are food insecure. Concentration of major greenhouse gases continue to increase despite lockdowns. Fiscal deficits have widened. Public debt is at record high. The vulnerability of financial system has increased as countries have extended moratorium on bank loans. Supply disruption is still a big challenge. On the one hand, pandemic outbreak and weather disruption have resulted in shortage of key inputs, and it has dragged down the manufacturing activity. On the other hand, the supply shortage alongside the release of pent-up demand and the rebound of commodity prices have caused consumer price inflation. If we look at the Brent crude price level, it has doubled to 84 or 85, which used to be 42.5 at the 40s, 1 year back. So against these backgrounds, we are discussing the appropriate pathways for sustained, inclusive and green recovery for BIMSTEC countries in this particular session. We'll also explore the avenues for cooperation among BIMSTEC countries for accelerating the pace of recovery. For this, we have very eminent speaker from BIMSTEC region. We have Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia from India. We have Assistant Professor Surat Horachaikul from Thailand. We have Famida Khatun from Bangladesh. And as a discussant, we have Shravana Barao from India. Well, first let me invite Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia. Rajiv Bhatia served as Director General of the Indian Council of World Affairs, ICWA, New Delhi, and is former ambassador to Myanmar. He's a distinguished former diplomat and active figure in India's strategic community and a prolific commentator on foreign policy. Ambassador, you have 12 minutes. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon to you and greetings to my fellow panelists. I would like to convey my sincere appreciation and thanks to Shri Arindam, my friend, and Shri Sachin Chaturvedi for this great initiative and also for inviting me to this event. Quite honestly, when I was preparing for my intervention, my mood was a little downbeat, but I'm feeling much better now having heard the upbeat presentations by Secretary General and the Foreign Secretary. And of course, we have noted some very good points of news they have shared with us. So in that light, Mr. Chairman, my remarks for the next 11 minutes or so will be centered around the political economy and the diplomatic dimensions, since I'm not really an economist, and I'm sure other panelists could go into the economic side even in greater detail. But I will very much focus attention on the economic facets of the underdevelopment of BIMSTEC. My approach is as a supporter and advocate of BIMSTEC, but it is an approach of being candid and yet constructive. The important role, as I see for us, is to pinpoint the constraints and challenges, but at the same time, try to show the way forward. We have to begin by noting that during the COVID era, BIMSTEC was rather lying low. Even an association such as SARC, which has been, according to critics, on a ventilator, managed to have a conference and some cooperation program to combat COVID. But somehow BIMSTEC could not find its way to do so. And Secretary General acknowledged this today when he pointed out that this was all done by the national governments. I wish it had been different, but there must have been powerful reasons for whatever eventually happened. Now, in this light, I think it's also very important in the next minute or two to recapture once again the immediate history. The longer history has already been presented by the Secretary General. I think the history of the last 5 years is very clear. Until 2016, BIMSTEC had made very limited progress, but it went through a kind of a golden phase during the 2-year period from 2016 to 2018, which was marked by the leaders' retreat, the outreach with BRICS leaders, the first meeting of the national security advisors of the member countries, the 15th ministerial conference in 2017, and the 4th summit in 2018. I think scholars then began to believe that BIMSTEC was moving on a higher and faster trajectory. But then came the subsequent phase of 2019 to 21. Some critics mentioned that this was the time of a kind of suspended animation of BIMSTEC. We know, of course, taking a sympathetic and constructive view, that this was actually the period of preparation and consolidation, even though some of the bilateral relationships during this period did cast some dark shadows on the further growth of BIMSTEC. And I'm referring here to Bangladesh-Myanmar relationship, India's ties with Nepal and Sri Lanka, the coup in Myanmar, and of course the ever spoken the China factor. But be that as it may, the biggest issue was COVID, which the chair has so beautifully stated, and therefore I need not go into this. So I come straight away to my next point, which is what should we do? And my considered answer is that we should be inclusive. I looked and re-looked at the entire list of panelists in this conference, in this symposium of 2 days. I feel that we have a lot of officials, diplomats, former diplomats, experts and academics, but some key constituencies are missing. We do not have representatives of business and industry here, and we do not have representation from the third space, that is civil society, youth, universities, and rest of them. So I think it's very important for BIMSTEC to be inclusive, not merely in its action, but even when we are thinking and talking about its future. Now, in this context, I would like to take a few minutes to develop my idea that the economic dimension, the business dimension, is of paramount importance, because BRICS cannot be made just by officials and experts. Officials, that is the governments, have to be the enabler. Academics will always remain the critics, the assessors, and the ones who show the way. It is really other members of polity which actually will do the transactions and make the economic pillar strong. So in this context, permit me once again to draw attention to a very useful knowledge paper which was prepared by FICCI, India's premier business chamber, in 2018. And this particular publication, which I'm just showing you on the screen for 5 seconds, was very analytical and objective in pointing out that there would be only 7 key areas of interest of BRICS in future, and they were trade and investment, transportation and communication, energy, disaster management, tourism, people-to-people contacts, and blue economy. So we would like to see, when eventually after the summit, the sectors are rationalized as to how this list of 2018 differs from the list of the summit, and then we will have to shape our preparations accordingly. My second point under the economic chapter, Mr. Chairman, is about the free trade agreement. We heard what the Secretary General said, but the fact remains that there is this myth that has been created that business people do not want BIMSTEC FTA. Now, this is not true, and in the FICCI knowledge paper, it was pointed out very clearly. The paper quoted a perception survey that was undertaken at that time, and the survey made it very clear that an overwhelming percentage of respondents had favored the FTA, and therefore our suggestion would be for BIMSTEC leadership to work on the goods FTA as well as on the services FTA, making it a comprehensive free trade agreement. At a time in India when the Indian media is talking a lot about India's FTAs with countries like Australia, UK, and the European Union, the silence about BIMSTEC FTA is deafening and disturbing. Then I also want to make 2 very quick points under this very chapter, and this is that there is a very strong need to create BIMSTEC brand. I think Foreign Secretary referred to this. It's only when we have a certain sense of awareness of BIMSTEC personality, particularly in the field of trade and industry, that this would be a very good thing for the institution. And finally, the scheme of BIMSTEC visa, which allows freer movement across the BIMSTEC region, is of great importance, and I hope our officials are working on this. So in this slide, Mr. Chairman, I come straight to my last part, which is the conclusion, and I would like to make a few practical suggestions. The past 2 years have been, of slower activity, and the Secretary General himself pointed out that after the summit, the hope is that BIMSTEC would become more visible and would be strengthened. So we wish to lend our full support to that spirit and that idea. I think it is time now for BIMSTEC to come out of its shell and play a more assertive, more active public role as the chief institution of this region. I think we should stop calling it sub-region. BIMSTEC region has now become a full-fledged region. It is centered around the Bay of Bengal. So it involves the Bay of Bengal community. And I think it is important that we work on that basis with a much greater confidence. My second point, once again, the need is to be inclusive. So whenever we do things, we must include those who are absent today. And finally, therefore, the key tagline here is that BIMSTEC is everyone's affair in this region, because it is meant to serve the interests of the region as a whole. And it is only when we think of the larger collective interest that we can feel very emboldened and very empowered to proceed forward with confidence and with greater effectiveness. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ambassador Bhatia. Well, Ambassador Bhatia has highlighted the political economy of regional cooperation in BIMSTEC region, as well as the timeline of diplomatic efforts to reinvigorate regional cooperation in BIMSTEC region. He also emphasized the need for making BIMSTEC process an inclusive process and take into account the concern of all the stakeholders. Thank you, Ambassador Bhatia, for your presentation and providing very practical suggestions for making BIMSTEC a visible, regional, visible and full-fledged region. Okay, with this, I would like to invite Professor Surat Horachikil. He is founding director of Indian Studies Center, Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. He is a lecturer in International Relations Department, Faculty of Political Science at Chulalongkorn University, Thailand. Over to you, Professor Surat. You have also only 12 to 15 minutes time.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yeah, of course you are.
Okay.
Audible.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the organizers for inviting me. And I hope I will not upset you, because I don't have much knowledge to share with you. And especially when I have to speak after Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia. So I guess, I don't have any interesting points to share, but I will also, discuss a little bit about my experience and what I feel. And according to my various interviews, which I have conducted over the last 3-4 years with regard to BIMSTECs. Now, see, I fully agree with Ambassador Bhatia that when he divided, BIMSTEC into different times, in different phases, and I would say is that about 8 to 9 years ago, there was an article saying that the death of BIMSTECs, which was, of course, very upsetting for me, who is a BIMSTEC maniac, a very passionate person for BIMSTECs. I felt very disturbed at that time. And today, what the Secretary General of BIMSTEC has informed us, is, of course, a very in good spirit, uplifting the morale. And when we talk about the transportation, connectivity, the master plan, the ADB support, the BIMSTEC charter, and so on. And before coming to this webinar, I was also involved with Department of International Economic Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Thailand, preparing Thailand to be the chair of BIMSTECs for the next 2 years, and there are some interesting ideas in there, which of course talk about post-COVID issues and how to, ensure that we strengthen BIMSTEC and so on. Now, next year will be 25 years of BIMSTEC, and definitely, you know, we can say that, as Ambassador Bhatia discussed before, that the progresses in the past were quite slow, undoubtedly, you know, due to different factors and, you know, different contextual periods whatsoever. And then I agree that, you know, when the Secretary General of BIMSTEC told us about, you know, new developments of BIMSTECs and so on, which is, of course, very, very good. And it basically uplift the morale of those, you know, who have been very passionate about BIMSTEC for a long, long time, given that, you know, in year 2001 and 2002, you know, I was discussing with my Indian friends in a hotel in Kolkata, you know, on the futures of BIMSTEC. So I'm talking about things of 20 years ago, which we did not see this kind of future. So it is very good, and this is how what we do in Thailand also, to groom new youngsters, okay, to be more passionate about BIMSTECs, because we are not going to be there for very long. So let the new generation also take care of BIMSTECs and have that sense of belonging as well, okay. A lot of people in Thailand call me Mr. BIMSTEC Maniac, okay, because wherever I go in my radio show, my television show programs, okay, I always discuss about BIMSTECs, okay, because the first thumb rule is that you need to popularize BIMSTECs. You need to let people know what BIMSTECs is all about, okay, and BIMSTEC is quite known among we scholars, among certain circles, but it's not very well known among the general, the mass, okay? And this is, of course, our duty, our job, to ensure that people know about it, okay? Otherwise, BIMSTEC will be very exclusive, not inclusive. And we need more and more people to get involved in this boat of BIMSTECs. It's Bay of Bengal, okay? This is what I keep doing all the times whenever I find opportunities in my lectures, whether it's National Defense College, Staff and Command College, okay? Anywhere, I will talk about BIMSTECs all the time, okay? And then it helps a lot. Now, the very big questions, okay, coming up here, very challenging one here, is that how do we make BIMSTECs relevant to the need of people, of BIMSTEC's member countries? Okay, how do we engage more and more people, okay, for this BIMSTECs? How do we make BIMSTECs or Bay of Bengal a very special place? Okay, immune from all kinds of things and so on. So I will spend my time here and a little bit of time on certain areas. Firstly, okay, we need to strengthen the Secretary's office more than ever before. And we need to do more to make sure that this mechanism is there. Okay, which of course, in the past, when we used to work for BIMSTECs, okay, there was no office, no section, nothing, you know. But today, we are hearing more and more positive things, you know, and BIMSTEC Secretariat Office sends us all the communication details to work together. I recently received new communication with regard to 25th anniversaries of BIMSTECs next year, that we are going to do something together and so on. So good news, okay? And we need to do more. We need to contribute more to ensure that the Secretary's office, okay, is stronger than before. It is getting stronger, but still we need to do more. See, if we praise BIMSTEC all the time, we are not being critical about BIMSTECs, then we are not helping BIMSTECs to grow. So that's why I sometimes focus a lot on weaknesses, to ensure that BIMSTEC has a good futures ahead of time. Now, the next point, okay, which I want to discuss with you all is that on economy, trade, okay. Of course, we heard many pieces of information, and the Secretary General has already informed us also, maybe by next year, they could sign agreements on certain trade issues and so on, okay. Very good, but again, you need to accelerate the pace of economic cooperation, okay. But once when you get the agreements don't work on their own. Okay. One of the findings that I got it from Myanmar, for example, is that ASEAN-India free trade area or free trade agreement, okay, is largely underutilization. Its mostly focus is on bilateral. So basically, you have to understand that when Ambassador Bhatia said that you need more participants from other kinds of sectors, in my notes here, I nodded my head straight away because you need Chamber of Commerce. You need people who know what they want to trade, what they are interested in. So whenever I do BIMSTEC training for the business community, they don't want you to talk so much on BIMSTEC more than half an hour. They want to ask you many questions. And these questions are extremely interesting because they know what they want to trade. And here we should not only focus on multinational corporation alone. We should be focusing on SME as well. Okay? Because they are the kind of people who can be quite mobile as well. Right? Please bear in mind also, when I focus on economy, okay, I am trying to suggest that, yes, it is important, but at the same time, focusing on economic relations alone is also dangerous. Okay? Because we don't live in the world that it's only markets, trades, goods and services alone, and at the same time, we have to think about sustainable development and other kinds of things as well. Okay, these we have to take into account. So we can do this, equally at the same time. The next point that we need to do more than before is, of course, to do programs and activities, strategic one, under people-to-people connectivity. Otherwise, BIMSTEC will only belong to elites or us, former diplomats, scholars, okay, which of course will not be very sustainable. Okay, BIMSTEC has to touch youngsters' life as well. BIMSTEC has to be about other people, all walks of life. Okay, and we must do this in a very strategic manner. And this can only be done if we give more space to the Secretariat Office to do the strategic communication, to do the strategic activities among people to people. Okay? Please, we have to take into consideration very seriously about denying, okay, about saying no to extremism of all kinds. Okay? Do not underestimate extremism. Extremism can rob us. Extremism can derail all kinds of things, because eventually extremism can run in parallel with national interest as well. So it's a job of people-to-people connectivity that we will say no to extremism and we will embrace pluralism. This is something very important. You can see that there are many groups of people in South and Southeast Asia who have been very powerful in embracing pluralism, who have been cherishing pluralism, advocating pluralism, okay? And this is, of course, something very important that BIMSTEC should devote space for them. Because at the end of the day, extremism will be related to cyber security, traditional securities of all kinds, This is something that we need to pay special attention to. Okay? At the same time, we can actually even narrow down, okay? What are the interests of BIMSTEC member countries in certain areas? Intellectual property rights, cultural heritage, joint tourisms, and other kinds of things. Okay, just doing this will make BIMSTEC quite a brand in itself, and this is something very important. Okay, one program that I would like to suggest the Secretariat Office is that, there are certain areas around Bay of Bengal where students are very keen to keep the beaches clean, to ensure that there are no plastics in the seas and so kinds of things, We can name them, using the word of Bay of Bengal or BIMSTEC, This will bring sense of belonging to people. So post-COVID recovery is not only about economy alone. Yes, economy is very important. Agreements on trade and other kinds of things, very important. Transportation, connectivity, very important. Charter, very important. Okay, all kinds of things. But at the same time, how to make sure that we also have sustainable society as well. This is, of course, undoubtedly will be very healthy for us in the long run. Okay, so all in all, what I want to say is in here is that the last point, which is of course very important issue here, is that yes, the Secretary General has informed us this morning that short-term national interest has been narrowed down, and there are now more common grounds among us. But I still think, okay, short-term national interests among each country are still quite a barrier, okay, to cooperation. So what does it mean is that, we need to, of course, sit down together and try to exchange ideas and learn from one another what BIMSTEC would benefit the peoples of BIMSTEC in the long run. Okay? If you try to look at short-term national interest, then of course, it's all about deficit surpluses and so on, Long-term benefits would mean that, what Professor Ishani also mentioned about geopolitics and other kinds of things. This is, of course, quite a challenge because the BRI versus Indo-Pacific's pressure exerting on ASEAN member countries is immense here. You cannot deny that. Yeah? And then there are undoubtedly, conflicts and among certain countries, whether you are leaning toward that side too much or what Amitabh Acharya called that, the centrality of ASEAN is at stake and so on. So we have to think of it as well, because post-COVID does not only means political economy terms of trades and services. It will also means, more of geopolitics related issues that coming here. So I think I have already spent a lot of time, Professor Poshpande. So I would like to stop it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. Now, I have privilege to invite my old friend, Dr. Famida Khatun. She is a prominent economist in Bangladesh and the executive director of the Center for Policy Dialogue, a leading think tank in South Asia. Dr. Khatun, over to you. You have also 12 to 15 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Posh Raj Pandey. Indeed, we go a long way Actually, we have been in this journey for many, many years, and it's always good to see, if not, in person, but through virtually. This is an opportunity in this age of technology. And I would, at the beginning, I would also like to congratulate the organizers for organizing such an important and timely event, focusing on the BIMSTEC region, and also focusing on a subject which is very pertinent at this point in time, because as we have heard from the chair of this session, Dr. Pandey, that how the global economy is looking right now, and what is the outlook in the coming years. So as we have heard that, at this point in time, things are looking a bit better, in fact, much better than last year. In fact, in terms of, both in terms of GDP growth and employment scenario and export, import, investment. So in terms of GDP growth, we have seen that the world, economic outlook by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, they have projected a better and increased growth in the coming years. And in case of Bangladesh, I can say that if I may quote the number of the International Monetary Fund database just published in October, in 2021 it would be 4.6%. It was, in fact, last year it was projected by them 3.5. Of course, the government estimation is different, but this is, since this is done for all the countries, so 4.6, and then the projection is that it will increase in the coming years, going to 6 to 7% in the next 4 to 5 years. And the World Bank has also projected that in 2021, the growth for Bangladesh should be 5%, which was last year 3.5%, and it might also reach next year over 6%, and then year after close to 7%. So we are seeing that there is a sort of bouncing back in many cases. However, when we discuss about the recovery, and the theme of this session is that recovery and restoring growth momentum in the BIMSTEC, when we talk about economic recovery, then we see that since the vaccination had started, so this scenario is more optimistic, both at the global and national level. But recovery and restoration, what type? So in the previous sessions also, and then the previous speakers touched upon a little bit on the types of growth. So broadly, we are talking about, even during when we're at the midst of the COVID last year also, we discussed that what kind of recovery we want. We discussed about building back better, but there is some objection that not building back better. We don't want what has been there during the pre-COVID period. We want building forward better, and building forward a resilient economy. And what kind of economy that would be? That would be equitable, and that will be sustainable. And also that, if we remember that the type of or the nature of growth which we are observing, in fact, most of the countries in the world, is that there was high growth, but that growth was not creating enough employment. That growth was not equitable. That was, and in many countries also, there were not enough adequate investment, both from the private and the public sector, and also the resource constraint, domestic resource constraint, had been one of the important challenges. Particularly, I can tell about Bangladesh, is that the revenue GDP ratio or the tax GDP ratio has been so low, and all these features are also relevant in the context of Bangladesh. So we want to recover the losses made due to COVID-19, but we want to also go forward. So the pattern, the type, and the nature of growth should be different, and it should be new and progressive than before. So I would, in this respect, I would focus on specifically four features of the growth which we I want to see during the post-COVID recovery period. First one is that the need to invest more in the health sector. So the immediate requirement is, of course, ensuring vaccination for all as soon as possible. All eligible citizens of this region and all over the world, they should be fully vaccinated, defeating the virus. Because, of course, we are seeing positive responses, and also it is commendable that scientists had very quickly invented the vaccines, which is one of the wonders also. But again, there's still a huge amount of uncertainty regarding the pandemic or COVID, because we don't know yet, because nature is beyond our control. So is it receding? Is it within our grips, or will it come back? So the objective should be containing the virus, the spread of the virus, if we really want to progress economically. And that depends on, of course, a number of policy actions. The first policy action, as I have mentioned, is that the vaccination is the immediate task. But during the post-COVID period, the investment for this health sector would be so important, because we have to have a robust, functional and efficient health system, so that whenever crises like this pandemic arise, the governments are capable of dealing with the crisis. They are ready to face the crisis, they handle the crisis more efficiently. We have seen not only the poor countries, not only the least developed countries or developing countries, even the developed countries, how they had struggled. So this is more important for countries within the region, that we have a health system in place which are more robust than before, than in the pre-COVID period. So this will not only require more investment for hospitals, ICU beds, doctors, nurses, and other infrastructure, including R&D in the health sector, which is very minimal here, but also developing a system. We are talking about the insurance, health for all. So developing a health insurance system for all. We can take examples also from some countries are East Asian countries, Thailand, for example. To some extent they have been able. So health insurance should be also one of the areas where the government should invest, so that whenever during normal period and also during crisis, citizens have access to affordable health services, and they can have the capability or capacity to pay for doctors and nurses. The second issue is to continue to have an accommodative monetary policy to support the business, the private sector, because we have seen that particularly even though the larger businesses, the larger firms, they have been able to survive. There were stimulus packages and they were able to utilize that stimulus packages, but the smaller enterprises, micro and small and medium enterprises, they have not been able to access fund, even though there were stimulus packages. So there were some problems regarding the formality, because many businesses, smaller ones, the micro ones, their businesses are informal in nature. So documentation requirement, the formalities, those are the issues which had really stopped them from accessing the finance. So they're still struggling. Many businesses, small ones, have closed down, and those who have survived, they have eaten up all their savings. So they're now struggling to come back, recover. So we have seen that the CMSEs, that is the cottage, micro, small and medium enterprises, they are still struggling. So investment for or resources for them is necessary, and for that the monetary policies should be such that there are funds for them. So it should be accommodated. It should be in Bangladesh's case, it is accommodated, but it should be continued for some time, because we must remember also that this sector is one of the important sectors of job creation. So if we ignore them, the job we will also be lagging behind in terms of job creation. And because when we're talking about recovery, and we are seeing positive signs, but you also have to remember that this recovery is not going to be smooth or similar for everyone. We have discussing about the cake-shaped recovery, because some will be recovered much better than the other ones. So the bigger ones, more affluent ones, can recover faster. The other ones, the smaller ones, will be lagging behind. So that is why we are talking about a K-shaped recovery. We do not want a K-shaped recovery. So in order to have the recovery sustainable, the third aspect is that higher investment. This investment is not only on physical infrastructure, but also on software infrastructure, because we have seen that during pre-COVID also the private investment, there was some sort of stagnancy in private investment in many countries, including Bangladesh. So there were lack of more enthusiasm. So if the policies and regulatory framework need to be changed, it has to be addressed at this point in time, and also any fiscal and policies also needed. So and also the other issue is that when we talk about investment, the quality of investment will be also very important right now. We touched upon about sustainable and green growth actually. So the world is now looking forward also to have a green growth which is sustainable, and particularly when we are in just a few days, the 26th Conference of Parties of the United Nations Framework on Climate Change, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, is going to happen. All eyes are on on that conference and what is coming, and then the whole emphasis is on to have green investment, green infrastructure. So the countries within BIMSTEC will also have to put more attention on that type of investment, that it is not just any investment, but it is quality investment, which will not create environmental pollution, which will not use more fossil fuel, which will not increase greenhouse gas emission, which will not destroy the forest. So that type of investment is required. And for that, we need technology, more state-of-the-art technology, and also finance. But again, when you talk about technology, one of the important aspects is also that we are at this day and age, we are living in the era of fourth industrial revolution. So that means that there is this, already we are seeing disruption in the labor market, and there will be more disruption, but at the same time there will be more jobs also. So now two policy interventions are needed, that the upskilling and reskilling of the existing labor force, and those who will be displaced, creating more jobs for them outside the industry, maybe entrepreneurship. And for that, again, access to finance will be so important. So the investment on both types, physical and software, and quality investment, which will ensure green recovery, sustainable recovery. My fourth and final point is that this growth momentum can be restored and sustained through increased participation of female labor force. We have seen that, yes, the labor force participation by women has increased, but not at the pace that we wanted. If we look at the global indicators, gender gap, parity, and all these done by many organizations, United Nations, UNDP, World Economic Forum, we see a huge gap within these regions also, even in the developed countries, but within our region. So, but many studies have also shown that increase in women's participation in the labor market will also increase the GDP growth. So we cannot ignore this huge labor force. Without their participation, we can't really think of a better recovery, higher growth, all this. So the overall emphasis during the post-COVID growth should focus, I think, not only on quantity but more on quality. There should be we should remember the distributional aspect, the inclusivity aspect, the sustainability aspect, the resilience aspect. All these will have to be brought together. All these will have to be brought at the forefront of our policy actions. And in order to achieve this type of growth, a lot will depend on what types of policies are carried out by the national governments and also the global community. Now, I'll just finish in a minute, but since we're talking about BIMSTEC cooperation, I'll just touch upon very quickly that how the BIMSTEC countries can collaborate in recovering the growth and for a better growth. So we have heard from the previous speakers who elaborated on that, but I'll just focus on a few issues. Is that at this day and age, of course, it is not only national governments, but also the regional governments, the global community. They all have to collaborate. Growth cannot be sustained, or we cannot prosper alone. So BIMSTEC has the potential to collaborate. There exists significant economic complementary between these countries, I would say. So improved infrastructure connectivity, improved international trade, these are mutually beneficial of the countries in the region. And also, so that's why we should have also explored the potential from benefiting from the blue economy and international maritime trade through Bay of Bengal, Indian Ocean, and Andaman and Nicobar Island. The other issue I have talked about interregional trade potential to speed up the recovery, and also partnership on food security and climate resilient agro ecosystem. For that, because I've mentioned about huge investment for climate technology, climate related technology, and we have to work together. And also collaboration for transitioning to a renewable energy for rapid recovery towards the green economy, and also the collaboration in case of fourth industrial revolution. I know how to deal with it and also to grab the opportunities which are created, because some of the countries within the region are a bit ahead than the other countries. So we can take help, and also share. They can share knowledges with the other countries how they are dealing with the interruption of the fourth industrial revolution. And finally, to reduce the vulnerability of natural disasters through international collaboration and regional collaboration. So all these, with this, I would like to end my talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Famida Khatun, for providing us the component of pathways of inclusive and sustainable recovery, as well as identifying the key areas for regional cooperation for rapid recovery. Thank you once again. Now we have discussant. We don't have Dr. Sri Radha Datta. I think she's not present here.
Dr. Pandey, Dr. Datta has some personal problems, so she has unfortunately not been able to. Yes, you can take it.
I move to the discussant. We have Shravana Barua as a discussant, and this is ICSSR Doctoral Fellow at Center for International Politics, Organization and Disarmament, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. Shravana, now you have the floor, and maybe you can take 10 minutes or so. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I was hoping for much more time to discuss, because it's been such a meaty presentation by our speakers, but I will try and stick to the time. I have to begin with just on the theme of post-COVID economic recovery. I think on the health front of it, we are still not in a post-COVID era, and we must remember that. And that is when we will progress on all other fronts. Of course, when we are talking about the economy, it is time to talk a little bit on what we can do post-COVID, of course. And after hearing our speakers, I would like to broadly point out 2 or 3 understandings. Firstly, as a representative of youth, if I can say so, and also an academician, I would like to highlight what Mr. Surat Horachaikul has said, that is talking to the youth about BIMSTEC. Very, very important. Even currently, I'm sitting in one of the northeastern states in India. If I utter BIMSTEC, I don't think so too many people know about it. It's the same point if I utter SARC, if I utter the word ASEAN, and so on and so forth. One of the reasons for that is, of course, what Ambassador Bhatia has also said, inclusivity, that we must engage not just experts, not just people who relate to the topic, but also businessmen, also people from various part of civil societies. So I think that is very, very important. And we must, in fact, at least after being here, I feel there is an urgent need to highlight this point. One way that I could suggest, since I have been studying how we could mitigate that gap, is through language. One interesting finding from my very short field trip here is that in the entire of Northeast region, if I leave out at the most Sikkim, because I've not been able to find out much, we have one institute here of language, which is the Global Academy for Foreign Language and Professional Training. Unfortunately, it doesn't deal with any of the languages of the BIMSTEC countries. It at the most talks about French, it teaches Japanese, German, Korean, and is in the process of introducing Mandarin, because I think that we have to address. Beyond that, there are 2 other institutes, but they do not have teachers. So if we are to learn more about these these forums, we must engage the youth. The youth will get engaged at 2 levels. One is through language, and the other part is employability. If they don't see a possible chance for employability, unfortunately, many of the youth today are money driven as well as driven by larger aims. So if there is not much employability, it will be difficult for that job creation that we discussed in the panel. So I would like to highlight this point, in fact, very, very urgently. The other point I think has been mentioned is the recovery, especially as Dr. Khatun mentioned about Bangladesh, that there has been, in fact, India and Bangladesh both, there has been some sort of a better picture relatively compared to other countries. In fact, we have 7.2% growth predicted by IMF, I think, for Bangladesh, and so on and so forth. The rest of the BIMSTEC nations have fallen behind, unfortunately. But even in Bangladesh, and so is the case also for Nepal, remittance has played a very important role, which means that people who are living outside, the diaspora is sending in a lot of money. Now, when that money is coming in, this is what Bangladesh has benefited from to recover in the post-COVID period. And as per what I have, there has been a record high foreign reserve of $39 billion from remittances. Even in Nepal, because it had, when we had the 4th BIMSTEC summit, even then there was this discussion. And in fact, UNDP has had an assessment study which talked about 3 sectors that can be looked at when we talk about economic recovery of Nepal. One is trade, tourism, and remittance. So especially for Bangladesh and Nepal, if we look at remittances, and I'm sure this also goes for other countries in the BIMSTEC, what we can possibly also look at concentrating on the diaspora, how they are sending the money back home. So if that channel is smoothened out, since there have been cases of lot of people now returning back to their country and with no jobs. So if we can do something about that, even I'm not clear as to what exactly we can do. But I think that is one point that has not been mentioned in detail. So I would like to highlight that. The third thing, which is also an area that I focus on as an academician, is transport and supply chains as well. In short, connectivity. And I think Mr. Shringla this morning has given us a very good picture. We have spoken about the BIMSTEC master plan on transport and connectivity. What I would like to just bring to everybody's notice is that there are also smaller states in Northeast India, for example, Tripura, which has plans of connecting to Bangladesh now through rail and road. We keep talking about connecting to Myanmar through the now famous Kaladan project, of course, and I was hoping Ms. Sridhara Datta would be here because she's an expert on the subject. But the fact that we have other avenues, Myanmar unfortunately has become a difficult ground. But I think we will keep attempting that. And since there has been mention of extremism also, I don't know if I can connect the two, but instability in Myanmar, whether it's because of the Arakan army, because of the Rohingya Salvation Army, the problems that Bangladesh and Myanmar has had. Of course, these are things that we must address. But beyond that, we have projects that are lined up for being able to recover better. We need to connect these dots and finish those projects and highlight on those projects. And just the railroad connectivity from Tripura to Bangladesh is just one other example. I'm sure there are many, many other such examples. So just on that front, BIMSTEC is doing well. We've heard that not just this morning, I think that is one front that a lot has been going on, transport connectivity, even the today's theme, vehicle for growth and development. So whenever we hear of that word vehicle, of course, the Motor Vehicles Act, and we have a lot to work on. So I think that is a very good focus area. Just, I have a couple of questions also. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to put them in front of the speakers immediately, but may I also put the questions immediately, or how is the format? Because otherwise I'll just stop at my
Well, you can put questions immediately.
Okay. So I would firstly, because we've spoken about Bangladesh, I would start with Dr. Khatun. There has been chances of recovering through the garments industry in Bangladesh, for example. But at the same time, export levels have not risen. For example, in the US, the export level, I think by August, it was still negative 19%, and many other such examples. Because in India, at least I have noticed that there has been a lot of people buying garments through e-commerce. So if Bangladesh is to increase their, because since the garment industry has done relatively well, is there something going on in terms of policy to link that industry to the e-commerce industry? Just one question that has come to mind, because I think the e-commerce industry, if linked to the garment industry in Bangladesh, and we can obviously, all of us know, we can buy it from wherever we all are sitting because of the technology. So can something be done, or has something been done at a local level? My question to Ambassador Bhatia is that you did mention, and I almost agree, that BIMSTEC should be picked up from just being talked about as a sub-region. In fact, we have David Brewster, who is quite a well-known academician and scholar on the Bay of Bengal front, who says that Bay of Bengal is no more just a physical connect, but it's an economic connect and a strategically coherent region today. And similarly, I think Robert Kaplan, who talks about how the Bay of Bengal is starting to be a coherent region again. And all this also, of course, has to do with what is happening in the Indo-Pacific today. But I do feel that, just talking about it as more than a sub-region today is a little far-fetched. So I just want to hear your comments on that. My question to Mr. Horachaikul is the fact that it's a very micro question rather, because you mentioned this point about, how we could be naming beaches, we could be naming uh, uh, sites which the public uses along Bay of Bengal or BIMSTEC. But I do feel that simply using these names sometimes creates misconception. So in that case, how do you think we could address this? Because we hear so much about in India, of course, we are filled with leaders' names used in infrastructure. But trust me, not many people know much about it. It remains at a very superficial level. So we need to be careful as to how we are, popularizing, as you say, among the public. So these are my very rough three questions, and I think I will end with that at the moment and let Chair decide how the questions have to be answered. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Shramana. Well, so now we have this question and answer sessions, but here we have altogether 84 participants, and the time is we have maybe around 20-25 minutes. Exactly, 21 minutes. So I don't know how organizer plan to
Dr.
handle
Pandey, if
this.
I may just respond to that. You may choose to take the questions. Any other questions are there right now? You may choose to take them right away. I would request the audience to put them on the chat box or raise your hands. Make them very crisp and to the point, so that the responses are also very pointed. So if that is okay with the chair, he may choose to take the questions and comments.
Okay, that's fine. But I think, I mean, we have just 10 to 12 minutes for this question and answer. And for questions, I would say we will collect, I mean, all questions and then ask the panelists to respond those questions. But again, I don't see any questions in the chat box. I don't see any
Yeah,
or
I don't think
maybe.
they're right at this point. So maybe the questions that has been made by Ms. Barua, the presenters may choose to respond. Maybe that will encourage other questions and comments to come.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's fine.
Yeah.
So Saravana has, I mean, general questions. I think, there are three questions. General questions. I think for all the panelists. The first one is, how can we engage youth in the BIMSTEC process? That is one question. Second is, how can we make remittance, particularly remittance in Bangladesh and in Nepal, a driver for the recovery, post-pandemic recovery? That was second question, from Shramana. And the third is, how can we improve the connectivity and transport system within the BIMSTEC regions, through regional cooperations? I think, these are the three questions you raised over here. And she had also, put questions and directly to each of the panelists. The first one was to Dr. Famida, particularly that is related to garment. And is it possible to, link the producer of garment in Bangladesh to the consumer of garment in India, maybe through e-commerce?
Okay.
But again, Shravana, let me inform you, Mark and Spencer in Delhi is sourcing its, product from Bangladesh. And there are other two questions for Ambassador Bhatia and also Professor Surat. Okay, let's start with Dr. Famida.
Okay, thank you very much. The first one, the common question regarding the remittances, I would say that yes, during COVID, there was this high increase, an unusual increase in remittances, and that is, when you see the trend of remittances, if there is any crisis during crisis period, and also during celebration, festival period, the remittances go up, and this one of the important reasons during COVID was that many workers had to come back with all their savings. That was the one important driver. The other one is that there is this incentive by the government, 2%, that if you bring $100, then you get 2% extra. The government will. So if you bring through the formal channel, and I would also remind many of you that there had been also a lot of debates that whether and why this remittance is coming. One of the other important reason is that they had come through the formal channels. You know that in Bangladesh and maybe in other South Asian countries also, a chunk of remittances come through informal channels, through hundis, and so it doesn't come through the banking channel. So that is another reason. But now you see that remittance flow has stabilized. It is now the trend, usual trend. It is high, but it is the usual trend. There is no spike here. And how that can be invested, in job creation or for flow of sustainable income. As you know, if you look at the utilization pattern of remittances, traditionally, it is mostly used for consumption, day-to-day consumption, building a house, education, marriages of children, day-to-day expenditures. But nowadays, there has been more emphasis that how some of these resources can be channeled through the investment procedure so that these families have when they come back, they have something, so that they can be engaged in some small businesses and all that. So we have dedicated, banks also for that. The rest can be, dealt by the other speakers. By coming to the specific question in Bangladesh on the ready-made garments, yes, e-commerce is an opportunity, definitely. There has been, this sector is it is increasing, gradually expanding, but mostly within the domestic sphere. One of the important issue here is that when you talk about cross-border e-commerce, there are some issues which are now being discussed. For a long time, it is being discussed at the World Trade Organization. There are, many countries are debating. So what should be the mode of payment? What should be the taxation? All these technical issues are there. That's until and unless those are resolved, the increase in e-commerce, cross-border e-commerce, will be really challenging. But at a smaller scale, it is being done, as Dr. Poshras Pandey has mentioned. But again, in order to expedite or expand that, the regulatory and legal framework within the country has to be also in place, because in Bangladesh, the regulatory framework for e-commerce is just now started, for the domestic market, and also that is also in the context of some of the anomalies or some mismanagement of the sector. So this first one is regulatory legal framework, strengthening that formulation of that. The second issue is also the internet infrastructure. Yes, we are, we have internet connection, but more broader and also stable infrastructure for internet is important, and also the ICT related skills. So all these are, so this is not only a domestic issue, as I have mentioned, this is also an international issue. So when those issues are resolved, I think more and more we'll see that we can export also the ready-made garments to the world market through e-commerce. I should also a little bit, I mentioned just in 30 seconds, is that in recent period, the export, ready-made garment export has been really increasing, from a month-to-month basis. It has the increase has been over 40%. So gradually we are recovering, because last year many buyers had either cancelled or postponed their orders, but they have started, and more the economies are bouncing back, the orders are coming, and then we are seeing the reflection in the numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Famida. Professor Surat, over to you.
The question that Ms. Barua put to me perhaps come from the miscommunication. I was suggesting that, perhaps, there are students who like to protect their beaches in their local areas, not to dump plastics and other kinds of things, the environmental groups. Perhaps around the Bay of Bengal area, you will find schools in India, Bangladesh, in Myanmar, in Sri Lanka, in Thailand, or in other places. Okay, this can include Himalayan. Sorry, somebody, Professor Ishani, you are switching off. You have to switch off the mic. Professor Ishani, sorry. Okay, so I was suggesting that the campaign for environment that students love to do can actually have the Bay of Bengal word added to it. Okay, so I'm not naming it after any leaders or as such, So we are talking about Bay of Bengal. We are talking about area, geographical area, that are connected to people, because the word Bay of Bengal is older than the word Southeast Asia, South Asia, or even ASEAN. Okay, so I mean, using the ideas of what you can read from, for example, Crossing the Bay of Bengal by Sunil Amrit, for example. But at the same time, since you mentioned about places that I did not mention, but let me give you also one example with regard to places. You see, I took Thai people to India once a year, okay, all top civil servants, business community, and so on, explore them about India and so on, okay. At one time, we went to the National Museum just opposite the Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi, okay, and that was the place that gave us the concessions and entrance fees, okay, on the basis of BIMSTEC, okay. This is, of course, an issue that, of course, has been ongoing within BIMSTEC circles, okay. And recently, I also saw Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Thailand discussing about this as well, right? So, I mean, sense of belonging can come, and I mean, I agree with you that the most important thing is that we should not underestimate the ideas of the youth. They are more of transnational people, than even us also, in many senses, So, I mean, that they can be connected to one another. And when I talk about this, I was referring to some empirical evidence that I learned from campaigning ASEAN in Thailand, for example. So there are many youth programs among ASEAN students, of high school, secondary school, primary schools, And today, with the virtual reality, the technology of communication that we have in hand, okay, I mean, they can do a lot of things together, and this can be a kind of foundation of, BIMSTECs in a sense, might not be much, but at the same time, letting people know what BIMSTEC is about, what Bay of Bengal is about, is undoubtedly, to me, doing everything, whatever I can do, okay, I think it helps, it helps. You need to familiarize them, and sometimes we familiarize them according to what they want. If they are environmentally sensitive, okay, then we go and do something with them, So that's just one idea that I try to throw it there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Surat. Now it's over to you, Ambassador Bhatia. Well, there are a few questions in the chat box. Okay, I mean, it would be great, I mean, if you could respond to those questions. The first one is, I mean, how do you assess the future of BIMSTEC vis-a-vis tug of war between BRI and IPS, Indo-Pacific Strategy? That is, I mean, one question here in the chat box. And another, I think, I mean, that is also, I mean, diplomatically sensitive questions. That is with regard to the recent political development in Myanmar. That is, I mean, how do you see the comprehensive, I mean, security situation of BIMSTEC vis-a-vis coup in Myanmar? I mean, these are two additional questions for you, Ambassador Bhatia. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the opportunity to answer not one but three questions. The question from Shrabana is a good one and a sound one. Is it appropriate to say that BIMSTEC is now a region and not a sub-region? Clearly, in 1997, nobody could have made this assertion. But we are now virtually 25 years away. Probably even in 2014, we could not have made this assertion when SARC was still functioning quite well. But who would have imagined that 2014 would be the last summit of SARC? So in a way now 7-8 years have gone and SARC's highest political level remains in a sleepy mode. So this is one factor we have to take note of. The second factor undoubtedly is about the emergence of the Indo-Pacific, which is such a large region that sub-regions will have to be carved out of it. And my submission is that BIMSTEC can be one sub-region, just as ASEAN would remain another sub-region, and then there are one or two other areas further down the line towards the Pacific Islands states. So, governments don't create regions or sub-regions. This is created by the philosophers, by the thinkers, by the writers, and by those who connect with people who are thinking of the future. So, in a way, there is a clear complementarity of interests among these 7 countries. And if they want to seize the opportunity to translate that convergence into real programs, certainly then BIMSTEC can be treated as a real region. Probably we are not there yet. We could be, depending on the progress. Now, the second question as to how we assess the future of BIMSTEC vis-a-vis Belt and Road Initiative, this is also very important because this brings in the role of China. China has been now coming into a big way in South Asia and Southeast Asia, and therefore in the BIMSTEC region. They want to be the principal interlocutor of BIMSTEC, an idea which is not acceptable to several members of BIMSTEC. So there is a problem there, and once again, instead of the members pondering and wasting time as to what kind of relationship the institution should have with BRI, the right, prudent and wise approach for the 7 countries is to deepen and accelerate their cooperation. I think if we do that, then we would show our faith in the institution that we have created and that we have tried to run so far. On the third question, the situation in Myanmar and its impact on BIMSTEC, I should not underestimate this impact. It is very serious. It is very grave, and I think, in my view, the problem within Myanmar obviously would eventually have a solution that will have to come from within the country itself. There is the military government which is unable to bring the situation to normalcy. And there is the opposition, the National Unity Government, and all kinds of militant or not militant groups opposing the military junta. And so there is an impasse, there is a continuing insecurity, instability, continuing violence all around. And therefore, if security and stability are not established, normalcy is not established in the next 1 year or so, Myanmar will cast its dark shadows on the future of BIMSTEC. I may also add here, to be very fair to our friends in Bangladesh, that the internal situation of Myanmar is not the only cause of concern. It is very much the unresolved question of Rohingya people, 1 million or more people who have been sheltered by Bangladesh with deep sense of sympathy, taking a huge amount of burden on themselves. And therefore, this hope that just not talking about it, but by not acknowledging the problem, it would go away, it won't. And therefore, these two issues, plus our collective approach towards China, these three will be major politico-diplomatic issues that will shape the immediate future of BIMSTEC. My last point, Mr. Chairman, if you allow me, I wanted to say that it is in the nature of officials, and I know them a little bit, to present an upbeat picture. But I think I was hoping that today at this forum, Secretary General, Foreign Secretary, or even the organizers would give us the good news as to when the next summit is going to take place. We know what ASEAN does. The summit takes place twice a year. We know that many other organizations, annual summit is a matter of religion. For us in BIMSTEC, it so far works out one summit in about 5 years. This is not good enough. It will have to go down to one summit in 2 years and eventually an annual summit. And therefore, I want to use this platform to convey a very strong message to those who speak for BIMSTEC, including the BIMSTEC governments, that whatever they do, they must try to convene the next summit as early as possible. The package is ready, let it be launched, and let BIMSTEC begin to take confident strides into this decade. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ambassador Bhatia. Well, now we are towards the end of the session. Okay, it's already 1:30. I'll take a few minutes.
Dr. Pandey, if I may just intervene, I think we can continue for 10 minutes or so, since we do have the luxury of time. With your permission, again, if I may say that the question about the BRIs, as far as my textbook chat shows, was particularly directed towards Professor Surat. So if you are okay with it, if you would also like his additional comments relating to the BRI, if that is fine with you. And besides, there are two more, I think one more question that has come from Soham Roy. He already had his hand raised, but he has typed the message nonetheless. So if you could just look at it. Of course, it has not been directed at anybody particularly, so you have the freedom to ask anybody you wish.
Okay, it's with regard to South Asia, some university at BIMSTEC level.
Yes, and since the question by Dipendra Shetri was actually directed to Professor Surat, it's wonderful to have Professor Bhatia's comment, but it would be additional. Wondered, if Professor Surat could also respond to the question.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Ishani, Professor Pandey. And I fully agree with what Ambassador Bhatia said, of course, these particular questions will require, a lengthy answer. Okay, but I can assure you that there are many countries who are not feeling comfortable at all of being, exerted with pressures as such. Okay, and it's quite a big issue in this part of the world, undoubtedly. At the same time, BIMSTEC has also been seen strategically as a place, where you can actually balance some kinds of power in there. Okay. So again, to answer this questions that some, sorry, I could not remember the name whoever posted it there. Thank you very much, but what I really think is that, it is important that we deepen our cooperation, as what Ambassador Bhatia said, okay, because, it provides advantages for all member states in this geopolitical context as well. So I guess I might have to end it here, Professor Ishani, because I have another engagement at 3:10, which is Thai time right now. Bangkok time is already 15:03, and if possible. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Dr. Pandey, if you would like to take the last question of this person of one, Mr. Soham Rai, if you could just.
Mr. Chair, if you wish, I can handle that question.
Okay, sure, please.
Thank you very much. I think Soham has a number of questions about the future of BIMSTEC, and I think he's obviously a very optimistic man, and I'm afraid I'm going to put a lot of cold water on that kind of optimism. It's difficult to envisage that BIMSTEC can emerge as a South Asian Union. First of all, South Asia is different from the BIMSTEC region. South Asia refers to SAARC, a region which begins from Afghanistan and comes all the way down to Bangladesh. So there is a problem there. As we have already spoken, SAARC is in difficulty. So South Asian Union that involves BIMSTEC probably is not going to happen. BIMSTEC Parliament is an idea that belongs to the future, and I think it's only when BIMSTEC governments begin to really show some more, backbone, and they start expanding their cooperation, after the next summit, that the involvement of the elected representatives can certainly be thought about. I think that is a fairly good idea. About the language of security alliance and military exercises, etc. This is not the real language in which BIMSTEC speaks. At best, they are looking at two things: disaster management and counter-terrorism. And we heard our Foreign Secretary spell out the importance and success, progress of measures in those two areas so far. But militaries and alliances, this is quite, alliances in particular are somewhat alien to the thinking of BIMSTEC. So I suggest that BIMSTEC has taken significant steps. It is planning and aspiring to take more tangible steps. We should all hope that they would now develop enough confidence to take those steps and then start thinking of new stages by meeting more regularly. I think in this part of the region, officials and foreign ministers are important people, no doubt. We respect them, but nothing moves substantially if the top political leaders do not meet as frequently as possible. And frankly, now is the time when they should do so, both in virtual format and by meeting physically. This is our own neighborhood. I mean, they can meet in Kolkata, for example, or they can meet in any of the capitals. It doesn't require 3 days or 4 days. It requires just a day or even less than a day. I think the important thing is that the more political leaders will meet, the more they will develop a convergence and the more they will be able to give fuel to the engine of BIMSTEC. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Bhatia. I think I'm going to stop this question and answer sessions, and I'll take a few minutes. Though I'm not going to summarize this very rich discussions, but let me highlight some of the takeaways. Well, for us, the COVID pandemic provides a once in a lifetime opportunity to address the main long standing structural challenges, and particularly with regard to our economy. The post pandemic recovery pathways should steer economy into a path of green, sustainable, resilient, and inclusive development. The recovery must focus on the most vulnerable, that is, youth, women, the low skilled or self employed people, to ensure a transition from exclusion to inclusion. If we fail to address inequality and exclusion, it is likely to result not only in deeper social division but also have negative ramifications for productivity and economic activity. We need to ensure vaccination of all, and we need to increase investment in health sector. To make certain SMEs access fund, we need to continue this accommodative monetary policy. And similarly, we need to increase investment in knowledge, skill, and technology, as well as we need to increase investment in green. We need to increase green investment. Well, with regard to regional cooperation, we need to take tangible step. To take this regional cooperation forward, tangible step is the must. Here country need to expedite finalizations of BIMSTEC Free Trade Agreement, BIMSTEC FTA, and also all related agreement as early as possible. We need to engage private sector, including representative of SMEs and women entrepreneurs, as well as youth, in identifying the areas and modalities of cooperation in trade and investment. We need to look at long-term benefits, and we need to sort out short-term trade-offs. We also need to invest in trade facilitation, synchronize trade procedure, and adopt paperless trading system. Liberalization of trade in goods must be complemented by liberalization in services. Well, beside ICT and IT enabled services, certain key tradable services, including such as transport, travel, tourism, construction, health, these could have huge potential for intra-regional trade. Connectivity is the key for promoting regional cooperation. BIMSTEC countries could integrate national and regional transport development projects and could develop BIMSTEC trade corridors. They can also cooperate in developing a regional infrastructure for digital connectivity. We can introduce BIMSTEC visa to promote people-to-people contact. So, in this way, we can go on and on regarding the areas of cooperation in BIMSTEC. But what we need is the political commitment. The political commitment to have regular summit, and also political commitment to engage all the stakeholders. Okay, with this note, let me thank all the panelists for their stimulating and engrossing presentation. I request, all the participants to give big hand to our panelists. Now I hand over to the organizer. Over to you. And thank you very
Dr.
much.
Pandey. Thank you very much. And I think this has been a very stimulating and encouraging kind of a discussion. We have run 10 minutes into a fast schedule, so I would not speak long and take off your lunchtime. But I think what I learned from all the distinguished scholars that have made their points is that how seriously BIMSTEC is about itself, how visible it wants to be in this area. It is all about visibility. And the first thing is that apart from we making various discussions, we making inputs, it's important that the decision makers, and as one says, how, you want to take things forward, as Dr. Pandey has just mentioned, it is all about political will and political gesture. And let's not get, embroiled in bilateral issues or get moored by Chinese in the issue of China and things like that. We just have to do our act, get our act together. And it should start with the declaration of a summit. With this, I would conclude this session. I thank the chair and all the speakers for their time and their valuable inputs. And there is an announcement that unfortunately, the Honorable Minister of the State, the Ministry of External Affairs, Mr. Sri Rajkumar Ranjan Singh, has some pressing engagement and will not be available for his talk from 2:30 to 3. So therefore, we would unfortunately not be hearing him during that time. So we would reconvene at 3 o'clock. We now break for lunch break. Thank you very much.